What about salt? Are we trying to avoid salt, or are we trying to include salt? 2, are we trying to do anything special with iodine? I know Dr. Cousens has spoken a lot about this. Number 3, what supplements do you recommend? And number 4, just for Dr. Delgado, what do we do to be able to make love to our wives and girlfriends twice a day, 7 days a week?
The longest lived people in the world do have an early interest in making love. They continue to make love throughout most of their life. And usually if they are plant-based, they're likely going to avoid cholesterol clogged arteries. If you look in China, they have one of the highest rates of ED, interesting, but it's the Chinese wealthy that eat a lot of animal product. The monks and the Buddhists and so forth that are plant-based, they don't have clogged arteries. So your first order of business is get off the animal food, get on a whole plant-based with enough calories. If you don't have enough calories, your first interest in sex goes away when you're hungry. You can't be fasting below your caloric needs. So then you have to optimize, when you mention salt, aldosterone, you've got to measure the hormone aldosterone, which holds fluids into the body. And those people like myself who have low aldosterone, I have low vasopressin, and it's kind of a genetic thing. My grandfather had the same look too. So I need a little more salt. I'm a competitive athlete, and I salt to taste. I don't salt the water before it's cooking. I add salt after it's cooked the way McDougall does, sprinkle a little bit on it. Iodine, yeah, we used to have iodine in the salt. Now you have to use, I use milligram doses of iodine because I'm worried about Fukushima and the horrible pollution pouring into our oceans that everyone's pretending isn't happening. Why do you think up in Russia they had Chernobyl and 1 million people died from cancer? There's a higher rate of cancer now, right? Because of these horrible toxins. So iodine and the trace minerals, selenium, and all these things are somewhat protective in the thyroid gland. So I use a lot of different supplements to protect myself. And to also, I use a product called Amore. I use herbs that release, that attach to sex hormone binding globulin, because plant-based people have higher testosterone, but they have lower circulating free testosterone. So you've got to liberate it. And so I create supplements that it's called Dr. Delgado's Testosterone Booster. Sorry about the plug, but I put together 20 different ingredients with zinc, boron, the Tribulus terrestris, all the right maca, all the right things in there. And so I take those by the handful because that's one of the ways I keep up with these young studs. Otherwise, I'd lose my girlfriends to them. So the truth is, health and longevity also depends on your testosterone. You have to have a good circulating level. And as you age, just like thyroid might decline, I optimize my thyroid, I optimize my DHEA, but you should not take DHEA orally so much so as it's probably taken better transdermally, because when it absorbs, it stays as DHEA. When you take DHEA as a man orally, anything above 10 milligrams turns into estrogen. So we're an estrogen dominant society. I use a lot of DIM, indole-3-carbinol. Dr. Edwin Lee, the world-class endocrinologist in Florida, he states that he uses DIM like he pours like water. I used it because I discovered a solution to acne, and I co-wrote this book with board-certified dermatologist, Dr. Sonia Batterisi-Banisel, helping over 50,000 kids using DIM, indole-3-carbinol, with a delivery system, and iodine also helps for the skin. So I am a big believer in everything that it does to maximize my sexual ability. Also translates, I can, like the individual Napoleon Hill who wrote Outwitting the Devil, he said, you could transmute your sexual energy into your business, into your career, into your relationships. So I'm not a sex addict. I just love sex because it's enjoyable, and it releases over 30 different centers in the brain when we orgasm. Some men should not orgasm every time they make love, maybe once or twice a week as they get past 60, 70. My oldest client's 93, still active sexually. So the truth is we can do it, but I notice when the testosterone drops under about 600 down to about 200-300, if I let it get that low, I lose interest in sex, libido goes away, my clients lose their ability. So in those guys, we probably need BHRT, bioidentical hormone replacement, but I'm a big believer in using the herbs first. The sleep is huge for hormone replacement and growth hormone. Without enough growth hormone, you don't get a large firm erection. IGF, I keep my levels about 190. I think I put them in the show notes here while we were talking, all my lab levels, because you have to track them closely about every 3 to 6 months, blood and 24-hour urine. If you're not doing 24-hour urine, you're missing the estrogen metabolites, and that's where the danger is, not in the blood. You won't see it in estradiol. It'll be in 16-alpha hydroxyestrone, and various herbs knock that out. And I use a live detox I learned from a Dr. Chi, and he basically talked about using turmeric and asparagus and cypress, and it works. It stops the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. We're an estrogen dominant society. My book goes into huge detail on this disease hacking.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it up, your questions. So no, most people I don't think have to add salt or sodium to their diet. There are a few, but it's rare. In terms of iodine, you have to check your levels. I mean, many people are deficient, but I'll warn, if you're eating lots of seaweeds, except for nori, most of the seaweeds have like 1,000% of the RDA. So you need to dose it correctly. In terms of other supplements, most people need to be on vitamin D, vitamin B12. You can check your levels. And I'm a big fan of nitric oxide supplements like Cardio Miracle.
Thank you.
So I'll go next. Salt, I think our average intake is 7 grams and we need about 2. So salt is essential. Sodium is essential. Chloride is essential. But we are overdoing the salt. So, but salt is required. You can also get it from foods, but the point is we're getting too much salt, so we need to lower it. Second one, iodine. I just get potassium iodide in crystals, and literally I eat quite a bit of cruciferous vegetables, and they actually are processed with iodine. So what I do is I just dip my finger into the crystals, and every once in a while I just lick a little off my fingers. I don't measure it. In Japan, I've seen that their iodine levels are much higher. Like we do it in micrograms, and they do it in like 10 milligrams a day. Some of them that in their traditional foods. In terms of supplements, well, the number one deficiency is omega-3s, but they have to be made with health in mind. If they're going to be a supplement, 99% of the population doesn't get enough for optimum health. The second one is probably vitamin D, and the third one's magnesium. So I use those very consistently. And then the other two things, digestive enzymes and probiotics. Those are, I use them daily, those two. Those are main supplements. And in terms of sex, one is testosterone and the other one's circulation, because a lot of the aphrodisiacs are actually herbs that improve circulation. Because when your circulation slows down, it slows down most in your appendages. so you basically lose your circulation from the outside inward. So not being able to get it up is sometimes a harbinger of a heart attack, which will come maybe years later. But you already know that you have a circulation problem. And then, of course, the best aphrodisiac of all of them is to be in love.
Thank you.
Yep.
Gabriel?
Well, I was going to say, Brian, you can go first, but so I take, again, an individualized approach. I think the estimates of iodine that people get are too low, and I take a fair amount of iodine. We need to understand that the skin, the thyroid has 50 micrograms, the skin has 800 micrograms. The adrenals need it. The brain needs it. Research has been done to show that literally IQ increases. They did this study in Indonesia, and they gave the 5th graders iodine, and they increased their IQ by 8 points in 4 months. Mothers who have adequate iodine, their babies have IQs 13 points higher. So we're looking at adrenals, we're talking about brain, we're looking at also pancreas, and obviously thyroid. So iodine's important. I think it's what we need is higher than done. Now, the other issue is When I talk about salt, I don't talk about sodium chloride. That is not salt. Okay, we're talking about an 82 mineral level of salt that's available in different ways. I'm not going to use different brand names, but you need those 82 minerals and the micro minerals as well. So I think salt people aren't getting enough salt of good salt, not sodium chloride. So in the morning, I'll put a little salt on my tongue. I'll put a little bit in I do drink in my morning drink, and then kind of keep it going all day to keep a certain level of the 82 mineral type salts. So that's an important piece to the story. It helps your hydration because you can hold more fluid. Many people are dehydrated. So the minimum you want to take those 82 mineral level salt so that you can stay hydrated and improve your circulation. So that's how I look at the salt. We just discussed the iodine. The omega-3s, 95% of pregnant women are deficient in their long chain omega-3s, and the DHA is the kind of number one. So I think it's important that we get it. I get it from where the fish get it, from the yellow algae. Okay, I don't go through the other things because anything from fish is highly contaminated. So I do recommend that for most people. I also found postpartum pregnancy syndromes that the postpartum depression is greatly affected by a very low DHA, that because that mothers give to the babies the DHA for brain development and for the senses. So I recommend that people, particularly the postpartum depression, they take a fair amount of DHA. The ratio of DHA to EPA, about 1,200 milligrams to about 400 milligrams or 600 milligrams. That kind of 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio varies to the person. So those are supplements I take. I find that in today's world, a lot of people are B vitamin deficient because of their stresses, that they burn up a tremendous amount of that. Not just B12, I'm talking about all the B vitamins. So I do recommend that kind of supplement, a natural B12, which are low in terms of dose, but high in terms of potency. And Radiant C, again, a high potency, but low dose C. And then vitamin D is, we know that people don't have enough vitamin D, they have 50% more lung disease. So I recommend around at least 8,000 units of vitamin D a day, not 400 units I use. And that's kind of what I roughly do for myself. And I see lots and lots of clients, and I'm measuring all this in fairly good detail. We do need to understand, in all deference to the lab tests, they're about 80% accurate. So we have to understand there's a certain amount of experimental error in the discussion, but at least it gives you a sense of direction. Now, testosterone is important for your brain. It's important for your heart. And so I recommend a certain level of testosterone. You mentioned 600. You need it, yes, for sexual energy, but more we need it for our brain, our memory, and for our heart function. So those are different kind of perspectives on that. It's good to get a natural, like plant-based testosterone if you can. Mastering Love, Sex, and Zvi. Okay, good.
It's a book I wrote, John Gray endorsed, and it goes into the testosterone story and the estrogen.
Yeah. But you need those hormones in there. It does make a difference.
Thank you.
So that's the point I'm making, that we need that mix. So that's how I kind of approach it. And everybody's a little bit different, and it does change a little bit with age. So I'll put it like that.
Thank you.
Okay.
So it's interesting, Stephen, you asked us about the SSS. Number 1, salt. Number 2, supplements. And number 3, sex. So as far as salt, I concur sodium chloride, which is most of all of the sodiums that we use, almost every one of them. Sea salt, sodium chloride. What they get from Arkansas under the ground is sodium chloride. All of this is sodium chloride. If we've known historically sodium chloride dehydrates you and actually raises blood pressure because it contracts the ventricle, it contracts the capillary, so you have the same amount of blood that has to go through a smaller opening. That's why the pressure goes up. So do we need sodium? We forgot to mention that it's an antiseptic. Your lymphatic system uses it. And if you don't have it, you're going to be sick. So we do need it. So back when we created our green drinks in the early 1970s, we basically put at the base of it, what? Celery. So this is a great source of active, living, organic sodium. And by the way, there's never been sodium in vegetables grown in the Midwest or internal parts of continents. It's always been along the shorelines. So if you're growing it here in Florida, you're going to get a lot of sodium. That's why if you notice the kind of things grow here require a lot of sodium. And by the way, it's incredibly important. But don't take table salt, sea salt, all of these things that they market and tell you sea salt's healthier. It's the same thing. It's just floating around in the ocean. The second thing is supplements. Gabriel and I were sitting next to one another in an international conference we held on the campus here about 30 years ago. He was on one side of me, and George Malcolmus, God bless him, was on the other side. And within a 2-minute period, they whispered in my ear, didn't hear one another, and said, "Did you see the Framingham study on B12? Now, up until then, we were the come-to place on the planet showing vegan diets, you didn't require B12. What they did is blow out of the water what I believed and everyone else believed, because they said, even today, they haven't corrected it, that standard blood test B12 testing is inaccurate. So this completely threw me into another tailspin. You know, the first one was, why is fruit making tumors grow? Now, the second one was a big campaign too. And I said, oh my God, this is like amazing to me. And we realized that they are not adequate. Now, today with genetics and methylation problems, we understand it. We didn't know that 30 years ago. So when we're testing people, we do methylation testing when it comes to B12. And here's what we have established, not we, but the scientific community globally, that about 70% of the world's population lack B12. What I did here is look at meat eaters, fish eaters, dairy eaters, chicken eaters. They have approximately 8 times more, 8 not times, that's wrong, 8% more B12 deficiency than vegans, and raw vegans have the least. And we know that from Dr. Fontaine's work at Washington University in St. Louis, an Italian doctor. He flies over, he's half-time as a professor there. And he was the one that looked at raw food vegans, basically didn't. Why? Because we're getting bacteria on our food. It hasn't been cooked out. And what it is, it's a bacteria. It's not a B vitamin. When they discovered it, they didn't know where the hell to put it, so they put it in the B category. So B12 is an absolute essential for every man, woman, and child on earth, unless you like dementia and neurological problems and maybe a misdiagnosis for multiple sclerosis. If you like those, don't take B12. So this holiday season, give everyone B12, you know, and give a proper living food form. We extract ours from algae. The second one is algae. Algae were the very first life form on the planet. If you watch what I did yesterday on The Real Truth About Health, about the cutting edge science on bacteria and how we've now proven without a shadow of a doubt, if you're not eating a plant-based diet, your psychology and immune system are going to go to hell. In that, I was actually showing this planet was just a big puddle of water and there was no land. And this invisible bacteria came up that was, by the way, anaerobic. So the very first life form was something that didn't need oxygen. And about 1 billion years later, it morphed into something called what? Blue-green algae. And blue-green algae on the opposite end created oxygen. You, I, and every other living being on the planet came from that. So this microscopic invisible algae was your oldest ancestor. Looked better than a lot of my uncles and aunts. And the fact of the matter is, why I take 5 types of algae, but again, I have loot. You may just want to take one, is basically because it has everything in it that will ever come after it. Every single thing that will ever come in life after that you and I know, touch, feel, and taste is in that algae. It was the foundation of life on this planet. So I think algae is important. And by the way, I completely concur. We're so stressed out. You know, we think we're not as stressed as we were. We're more stressed. Look at Stanford's new terminology, Zoom disease. We're more stressed today than we've ever been, doing nothing, sitting on our ass and looking at other people's problems and entertaining ourselves on a screen. And our average American child's on a screen 6 to 7 hours a day. That's outrageous. And we're stressed. We're stressed. And so you do need B vitamins. Now, I would prefer people get it from sprouted grains. I would prefer they would drink wheatgrass, but a lot of people won't do that. So take a food-based form, and there's big, wonderful companies out there that make raw food-based forms of B vitamin complex. And so that would be it. As far as sex, I wrote the book on it. It's called The 7 Ways to Lifelong Sexual Vitality, one of my 30 books. And by the way, it was the most popular book. Doesn't matter, I can teach people to walk on water and reverse catastrophic disease. People want to know how to make love. I had more, the only time I turned interviews away in my life on television and radio was when that book came out. And that's the science of it. So we give the science of it. I completely concur with this wonderful doctor who's making love to his wife or his girlfriend 2 times a day. The more, I can't ask Anna Marie to do that, she'd cut it off. But the reality is, the more you make love, the more viable you are. I also concur with the fact you don't have to have your sex energy going only for sex. So if you look at people who, by the way, are the top leaders in the world and the top athletes and the top actors and actresses in the world, they all have a big sex drive, but they're channeling it, not to make love 24 hours a day, but they're channeling it for passionate things they do. Passion is passion. Either you can explore your passion with an intimate partner, or you can explore your passion doing what we do, and seemingly all loving this. So I'm a big fan of sex. It's not dirty. I was taught as a kid it was dirty. As soon as they told me that, I knew it must have been good. I didn't know what sex was, but I surely wanted to know immediately after that. Number 2, it keeps you viable. Somebody mentioned Asia. Asia, it's very common. 90-year-old couples are making love on a daily basis. Do you realize in the United States and Canada and most of Western Europe, 50% of our youngsters at 40 years old, we're not talking about 70 or 40-year-old youngsters, are basically unable to make love. They have erectile dysfunction. And I completely concur with Udo. If you have a libido problem, you have a heart problem, you have a brain problem. Because the same oxygen-rich blood, nutrient-rich blood, goes to all of those areas. So when we invented something called Circulation Max, which superseded anything on the market, I worked with a PhD up in Canada, triple PhD. Basically, what we figured out is that your libido came back, and we wanted to help people's heart. But every doctor I knew I gave it to test was calling me back and saying they want it more. Then they finally told me why.
Okay, thank you.
Just a footnote about the B12. The key word is human active B12. There's a lot of B12 kind of like substances, but it's human active B12 is what we really have to make sure we get as a supplement.